Evil Genius back with you again for our episode number 3, for our third little discussion here that we're going to have. And we have something kind of interesting tonight. You know, throughout the week I've been working on something completely different than what we're going to talk about here. Originally, I had thought that our topic tonight would be the battle for the soul of the Republican Party. The battle that's going on right now between the old line, go along to get along conservatives and the new school, the Tea Partiers, the fiscal conservatives, the young conservatives, and the battle that's going on between them. And that is an important topic, and we will discuss it in the future, probably next week. So be aware of that and be waiting for that. But you know, one of the things that occurs with political commentary and political analysis is that sometimes, even if you plan things out, you know, down the road like that, something will occur during the day or something will pop up in the news that requires your attention, and you have to kind of drop what your previous plans were and discuss it because it's that important. And I think something like that happened today. So that's why I want to make this slight change and slight veer off the road, because something was said today that I think really needs some attention. You know, sometimes in life, actually most of the time anymore, in our 24/7 media society, where cameras are in your face at all times, whether you're a politician, a celebrity, an athlete, whomever, if you are in the public eye whatsoever, there's always a microphone in your face. And so the result of that is that everybody tries to kind of play it close to the vest and stick to their talking points, stick to their script, and not really go real far into what they really believe about anything. They just sort of want to give the safe answer rather than what they really believe. And again, we see that in all walks of life, but you know, once in a great while, somebody will let something slip. And they'll be talking through their talking points or their prepared answer for a question, but they'll make one statement that kind of gives you a real insight into who they really are. And if you catch it, you know, you can really see some profound things. And I think something like that happened today. We had a situation where the mask kind of came off of somebody. That somebody was our imbecile-in-chief, Barack Obama. Now I'm taping this, just so you get a lay of the land here, what we're looking at. I'm taping this on Monday, February 28th. So the comments I'm going to be talking about are what Mr. Obama said earlier today at a gathering of the nation's governors that he was addressing. Now, some of this you might have seen by now on some of the other talk shows and columns and punditry type of things, but I wanted to have a little different take on it than what some others are going with. First of all, let's just cut to the chase and let's talk about the exact quote that I'm referring to, the thing that Barack Obama said that really piqued my interest and got my antenna up a little bit. Mr. Obama said, and this is in reference to the Wisconsin teacher labor situation, union situation that's going on up there that really isn't much of Obama's business, but he decided he wanted to talk about it anyway. Mr. Obama said, "I don't think it does anybody any good when public employees are denigrated or vilified or their rights infringed upon. We need to attract the best and the brightest to public service." Now, you likely have heard that quote by now, or at least you've heard the first part of it. That part about denigrating and vilifying public employees, that's what's getting all the reaction out there tonight as I tape this. But I thought the more telling part about this, I thought the more interesting part about that statement was the last sentence. Let's review it again. The last sentence where Obama said, "We need to attract the best and brightest to public service." Really? That's where we need the best and the brightest to go? Now, I don't really buy that. I kind of have a problem with it, to be truthful with you. I think back to something that a real president once said, Ronald Reagan, when he said, "Government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem." Now, if you go back to, I believe it was 1980 or 81 when Reagan said that, I don't believe that Mr. Reagan was referring specifically to Jimmy Carter and the people that he put in office and his specific government. I believe that instead Reagan was referring to the overall concept of a centralized, powerful government. He was saying that a centralized, powerful government is not the solution to our problems. That a centralized, powerful government exacerbates problems, causes more problems than it solves. And indeed, if you look back at much of the 20th century, you'll see ample proof of that. Look back at the Great Society, that bellwether achievement of Lyndon Johnson that was supposed to take a bite out of poverty and give the poor in this world a chance to raise up out of the gutter and compete in an equal playing field, and by golly, it was going to end poverty, or at least put it in check, and we all were going to have opportunities. Well, if you look back on it, the poor in a situation as bad or worse than they were in the late 60s when Johnson put that into play. Our inner cities are more of a war zone now than they were then. So the Great Society was a failure. We look at the housing crisis and the mortgage crisis that we're still feeling the effects of now. And all of that was traced back to the 1970s when the government stepped in and said, hey, you banks that are lending only to people who can afford, have shown an ability that they can afford over time to pay off their loans, that's unfair. You got to go loan to these other people over there who don't have any credit and don't have any way of proving to you that they can pay back a loan. You got to loan to everybody, whether they're a risk or not. And what happened? Well, bad loans are bad loans. The government forced the banks to put those bad loans into the system, and then, golly gee, people didn't pay the loans back. People that had shown no ability to pay loans in the past were given loans, or forced to be given loans by the government, and guess what? They didn't pay them back. Go figure. So you see just two of a myriad of examples where when the government steps into something, they really step into it, if you know what I mean. When the government steps into something, they generally cause problems rather than solving them. Sometimes they might have the best of intentions, but it usually doesn't work out that way. And, we know where the road to good intentions eventually leads. So that is a little worrying to me, that a guy like Barack Obama says that we need the best and brightest to end up in government, that we need to attract those to public service rather than the private sector, because public service has proven on the whole to be a failure. Public service is the cause of most of the problems we face today. But yet when Barack Obama makes a statement like, we need to attract the best and the brightest to public service, one can only infer that he also then believes that public service is a necessary component of our daily lives, and if we acknowledge that there's only a certain amount of the best and the brightest people out there, that there's only a finite amount of those who truly are playing and thinking and working on a level beyond that which most of us can conceive, if that number is finite and he wants most of that number in public service, then that tells me he must believe public service is a much more important and much more pervasive area for us in our daily lives than the private sector is. He's placing a higher importance on the public sector versus the private sector. He believes the public sector is more important. He believes, evidently, and it's only logical to make this conclusion, that the public service is somehow key to addressing the issues that we face. I would argue the opposite. If government actually stuck to the enumerated powers for which they have been subscribed in the Constitution, then over time you would be able to get rid of a lot of the government employees and a lot of the positions that are within the government. You don't need that bloated bureaucracy. And those people can then go back to the private sector. So if the government is doing strictly what we need it to do and nothing more, then the best and the brightest don't really need to go into government, at least not in any sort of huge number. They can be out there in the private sector. And more to the point, when you are involved in the private sector, and when you get wealthy in the private sector, when you are successful in the private sector, you can only do so by satisfying the needs and the wants and the desires of the general public. Your success is a direct correlation to how satisfied the public is with what you are providing, with the good or service that you are providing. It's what we call the profit motive. If people like what you're doing, they'll pay for what you're doing. If they like it well enough, you'll get wealthy. Pretty good idea. But the government doesn't work off of that regard. The government does not have any sort of incentive to do anything efficiently or do anything well or provide anything in a easy to obtain manner, because they don't operate off of a profit motive. If you have your job in government, then you'll have your job tomorrow, whether what you do today is successful or not. If you're a government bureaucrat, what do you care if the line at the DMV takes forever to go through, or if you get people in and out quickly? It doesn't matter to you, because you are not going to have an incentive to do your job better, because you're going to have your job tomorrow, you're going to get paid the same, and your success is not tied to the satisfaction of those you serve. That's where the private sector has it all over the public sector. So if we understand from that the private sector does a much more effective job of providing to the people what they need and what they want and what they desire, a much better job at doing that than the government can. And think about it. You know, when you go to send an important package to someone, do you trust it to the Postal Service, or do you call up Federal Express? Do you call up UPS? Do you call up DHL? Chances are you call up one of those private companies, because you have more faith in them than you do the government. Costs a little bit more, but you'll also be a lot more sure that your package is going to get there. So it strikes me that if the private sector is a much more effective way of satisfying the needs, the wants, and the desires of the people, then we would want and we would need the best and the brightest to end up in the public sector, where they can do the most good for society and the most good for themselves and their family. The last place we need them is in government, where their gifts are wasted, where their talents are wasted, because they'll have no reason to do their jobs efficiently and do their jobs well. Their only motivation, like anybody else in government, would be to hold on to their job through political means or whatever. Their motivation isn't to satisfy us, but it is in the private sector. You see, well, it's what we've said all along about Barack Obama ever since he ran for president. He believes that government, the concept of government, centralized government, is a key factor in the success of this nation. We and I disagree with that fact. We disagree with that idea. It's not a fact. Heck, the 20th century has proven that government as a concept is a failure. We as Americans do not need to be governed. We do not need to be led. We can govern ourselves, we can lead ourselves. Barack Obama does not believe that. He believes that we, the people, must be governed. He believes that we cannot, if left to our own devices, govern ourselves. That we, the people, if left to our own devices, cannot make the best decisions for ourselves, and that somehow the best and the brightest need to make those decisions for us. F you. We can think for ourselves, we can govern ourselves, we can lead ourselves. We don't need you to do it for us. And that, frankly, is the key sticking point in this huge political debate in this country right now. You want to know what divides the American people? You want to know where that divisiveness comes from that everybody complains about? It's that concept right there. That Obama and his followers believe government is necessary for human beings to flourish, and we on the right believe it is an impediment for people to flourish. You would do well as we go through the next year and a half and have the countless debates that we're going to have with the left. You would do well to keep that concept in mind and to keep that central theme of the debate in mind. Obama believes in government as a concept. We do not. And for America to succeed, we must not only cut spending, but we must cut government. and the best and the brightest need to go to the private sector, where everybody will benefit from their talents and their gifts. This is America's Evil Genius. We'll see you next time.